Author and playwright Drew Hayden Taylor's book, The Best of Funny, You Don't Look Like One, goes there. Yes, there, the tight, awkward, yet funny and frank places that many people don't often go on their own, into subjects as diverse as representations of Indigenous people in popular culture, of identity and Indigenous erotica. How does he balance humor with social criticism and commentary? Let's ask him. Welcome back, Drew.
Good to be here.
Good to have you back. I'm thinking it's going to be another giggle fest.
All things are possible.
Yeah, we're going to talk about how humor has played a role in your work. But before we do, I'm going to show you a clip. This is former Agenda in the Summer host, Pia Chattopadhyay, talking with novelist Thomas King on using humor in his writing.
I've always said that humor was an Aboriginal survival strategy. To look at something and find the humor in it, or find the satire in it, find that moment where it's so ludicrous and so awful that it actually is kind of funny. And I think we need that. When I write, if I'm writing about something that's very, very tragic, I always try to put some humor in it, because I think that a little bit of humor deepens the tragedy. And I think a little bit of tragedy sharpens the humor.
Do you see humor as an Aboriginal survival strategy?
Oh, completely. Like a lot of cultural humor, it's a form of survival humor. It's humor that's been filtered through 500 years of colonization, residential schools, reserves, all these different things. So as a result, Native humor has two functions. One, it's healing. It is a way of processing issues that have happened within a Native community and lessening the pain. And the other function is sort of a healing balm, where we, again, much the same function, we look at the world that we are in and the things that have happened to us, and by poking fun at it, by taking away its sting, we help with the healing. The other interesting thing about Native humor is because of those whole things, because it's a form of survival humor, it's very politically incorrect. And I mean, I'm sure you've heard the term, like, there are so many jokes in there that only we can tell, that other people can't. And they're often, because they are reflections of the disproportionate power structure in Canada and North America, they reflect that in sort of a tongue-in-cheek, barbed response. So it can turn a lot of people off. It can upset people, but within the Native community, it's one of the things that make us laugh.
And how would you characterize non-Indigenous people's reactions to your plays?
It depends. I mean, sometimes they get all shocked and surprised. Like your intro, you said, oh, he went there, he talked about it. You know, like, what do you call an Indian with a PhD?
I have to respond? I don't know.
A doctor, you racist. Now, the interesting thing about that particular joke is it's a reflection. It's one of those jokes where you can insert own ethnic background there. Because I did a book on Native humor called Me Funny, and I spent a year collecting Indian jokes. Now, like, I did it's a collection of essays by people, including Tom King, Thompson Highway, where we talked about all the different aspects of humor. But I didn't want it to be just a book about Native humor. I wanted it to be a book of Native humor. So I spent a year collecting Indian jokes from all over North America. And they came in, and as I said, some of them are very politically contentious, and others are very, very silly. But one of the other things I found I hadn't really noticed is there are lines of jokes where this is a Native joke written by Native people for Native people, or these are jokes where they're Native, but you can insert your own ethnic background into that joke. The joke I just told you, there's another variation. What do you call a black man who flies a plane? A pilot, you racist, right? Yeah. Whereas opposed to jokes that are specifically Native, by Native, for Native people. Why do Native people hate snow?
It's cold? Oh.
Because it's white and all over our land. Right? I don't know
if I'm supposed to laugh or not.
You have permission.
I know this happened a long time ago, but you do get reaction from your plays. What happened? You had a bomb threat for your first
Oh my God,
Alternatives?
yes, I forgot about that. Yeah. Alternatives, yeah. Which is a dinner party. The play is about a dinner party, because I had a whole bunch of ideas I wanted to explore, but they weren't really worth a whole play, and I was trying to figure out what kind of environment where can I explore all these different stories, these little elements of a concept, these issues, and I thought a dinner party, because any dinner party you go to, the conversation meanders all over the place. So it's a dinner party where these three politically correct white people, in fact, one of them is a vegetarian veterinarian, and the other three native people who call themselves alternative warriors, and who I was trying to do these characters that were they were young, but they were very, very well educated and smart. They could quote lame deer as much as they could quote Sartre. And so I put them into this environment where they start fighting. And when we were doing the workshops, it was really interesting because I had a bunch of also, one of the reasons I was doing this play is one reviewer had commented on my work saying, the interesting thing about Drew Hayden Taylor's work is all his characters are likable. So I wanted to create a play where all the characters were deeply flawed and inspired anger in other characters. So when this workshop was done, I had white people come up to me and say, is this what you really think of white people? And native people come up to me saying, is this what you really think of native people? And so the play was produced a couple times, and on one production in Vancouver, one day I got a phone call from the artistic director who said, did you hear what happened yesterday? And I said, no, what? And they said, we got a phone call from somebody who said, if this theater is going to continue to produce plays that are racist against white people, don't be surprised at what we leave behind.
Were you shocked by that?
I was absolutely, as a playwright, I thought, wow, I got a bomb threat. That is so cool. It's like journalists getting a death threat. It's like, wow, I've made it. I'm a grown-up playwright now. And they canceled performance, brought in the dogs and the police, and didn't find anything because those kind of people actually don't follow through. They're just looking for the publicity. But I just sort of remember being, wow, the ultimate in theater criticism.
Do you think it's like, to what extent do non-Aboriginal people understand Aboriginal humor?
It can be there. I mean, I had this one falling out with one of the editors of Me Funny. You heard me talk about how I got about 60 or 70 jokes and I went through them. And my editor had a problem with one joke. And she ended up leaving the book project over that one joke. And it's such an innocuous native joke that I was actually surprised. There's a lot more provocative jokes within the book, more politically incorrect jokes. But this one, she had, if I have 30 seconds, this native man and this minister are out for a walk. And the minister is teaching the native guy how to speak English. So they spend the day going, this is a rock. Can you say rock? Native guy goes, rock. This is the tree. Can you say tree? Tree. All day they do this. Those are clouds. Can you say clouds? Native guy goes, clouds. At the end of the day, they find themselves down by a river. And the minister goes, this is a river. Can you say river? Native guy goes, river. And on the way up, they go through some bulrushes, and they come upon a man and a woman in the bulrushes having sex. And the minister is all shocked and embarrassed, and he goes, I'm a man riding a bike. And the native guy takes out his bow and arrow and kills them both instantly. And the minister's all shocked and surprised, and he steps back and he says, why did you do that? And the native guy goes, man riding my bicycle. Now, my editor said, and I'm trying to quote her within the context of what she said, yes, I know I am a middle-class, white, well-educated lesbian, but I find this joke offensive. I think it promotes violence against women. And she says, now what if we flip it around and make it a minister and a native woman? And if you go through the joke, it might work, whatever, but you're still back at the same premise of this native woman killing a man and a woman, and there's absolutely no mention of the fact that it's a native man that's been killed too. She just said, to me, this promotes or advocates violence against women, and I feel very uncomfortable having my name attached to a book and would not be able to endorse this book to my sisters. So she left the project because of that one joke. Whereas I was trying, as I said, I want to give a complete collection of unedited, unexpurgated, if that's the proper terminology, collection of native humor for people to take and digest themselves. But that was not to be, and she had a problem with that, and she ended up leaving the project because of it.
Now, a lot of comedians complain about political correctness. Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, these are two powerhouse comedians who are reluctant to perform at colleges because of it. How does political correctness operate in your context?
Not really. It's not really an issue. You know, I claim it because both being Native, coming from a marginalized culture, and being a humorist, it gives me a certain amount of leeway to play with that concept. However, it has been an issue here and there. I remember I was doing a lecture on Native humor here in Toronto at one of the, I forget the name of it. It's an institution that deals with adult education, usually immigrants coming into the country. And I was told as I was going on, please keep in mind there are a lot of what was the term? Like Muslim men and women in your audience, so please keep all references to sex to a very, very strong minimum. I went, oh, okay. And I'm not a raunchy, I'm not a comedian. I'm a lecturer. I lecture on Native humor. And so I try to be responsive. About a year ago, I did a lecture at the First People's House at the University of Victoria. They hated me. In terms of political correctness, it was just absolutely amazing. They did not like it. And I've lectured in over 300 universities around the world. Right now I'm writer in residence at Wilfrid Laurier University. I did a lecture there about 2 weeks ago, a public lecture, went over very fine. And as I said, I've been in almost every university in Canada lecturing, and because of my credentials, I can talk about Native humor, Native sexuality, but except for some reason, University of Victoria. My adage in terms of what is good, what is not good, what is allowable, the line, the proverbial line for me is something I was told by an elder once, that humor should amuse, not abuse. Okay. And I try and incorporate that in what I do. Sometimes it pushes the image, it makes some people blush, but I do not at any point try to be abusive in my humor.
And you've talked about punching up and down when it comes to humor. When do you know if you're doing that?
I don't understand.
Earlier on you were saying that when you use humor, you punch up or you punch down.
Oh, yes. In terms of racism works from the top down, or humor works from the bottom up.
So how do you know when your humor is punching up rather than down?
Well, when you're making fun of the dominant culture or the situation, one of the interesting aspects of Native humor is we tend to go laterally. Of the 60 or 70 jokes I got for my book, I would say 90% of them made fun of other Native people. We didn't so much make fun of white people. Most of the humor makes fun of Native people. You know, that joke I just told, another classic, what's another word for Native vegetarian? A very bad hunter. And so there's a whole bunch, almost all the jokes I got made fun of Native people. So it's not really an issue.
Well, inquiring minds want to know, are you still mad at vegetarians?
So my best friends are vegetarians.
That was an awesome essay. I want to play you another clip. This is Chris Rock speaking with Charlie Rose about performing in front of all Black audiences.
When I do an HBO special, and this is the only time I do this, I kind of insist on an all-Black audience.
Yes.
And the reason I insist on an all-Black audience, you know, I've done probably 2 specials at the Apollo. Or, you know, please, my last special's in, like, South Africa, you know. I mean, like, South Africa and the Apollo in London. Because sometimes I do things that are critical of Black culture or critical of my people as a whole. And when you do jokes like that, it's important to cut to a Black face laughing to signal... that this is not racist, because Black people can be racist against their own people too.
So any parallels between what Chris Rock is saying with your own experiences?
Oh yeah, I've done jokes. It's so funny. I keep talking about I do jokes. It's like I've only done stand-up comedy once, and that was of all places the Kennedy Center in Washington D.C.
Well, how is comedy different from humor?
Comedy is structured to get an immediate response from audience members either standing right in front of you or watching you, whereas humor is much more layered and subtextual. humor can come in many different many different forms and many different palettes, whereas comedy is usually, pa laugh, right? So I have done some jokes within the Native community where I get scowls, where from the occasional, but that's true of anything. You get 100 people in a room, you tell a joke, and I can guarantee 2 to 4 people will not find it funny, and 1 or 2 might actually find it offensive. But that's just the nature of humanity. Some people find fart jokes. I don't get them. Some people find them funny.
I find them funny. But then again, I'm not very intelligent. Anyway.
And you have kids.
And I have kids, right? So it's part of the job. So last year, there was some controversy over Adam Sandler's movie, Ridiculous 6.
Yes.
And actors were walking off over the portrayal of Indigenous actors. Are you surprised by this in 2015, 2016?
Well, some of I read snippets of it. This is a difficult thing for somebody like me because I find it very uncomfortable to criticize something I've never seen. A lot of people do it. A lot of people they can refuse to see it, but to sit down and be critical of something that they haven't seen, I find that disingenuous. But on the other hand, I don't know if I want to waste 90 minutes of my time watching this movie. When all the controversy came out, there were snippets of the script set out there. One person named Beaver Breath, and another person I forget some horrible references to Native women and stuff like that. And what little I read, I did not find funny. I found funny maybe in terms of the Three Stooges, very broadly based, nothing really. I like more insightful. I like the odd sight gag. I like the odd, walking into a wall. I mean, I don't mind that, but what little I read did not make me want to watch the movie. So what little I read about it made me not want to watch the movie. So that's basically what I can say. I'm so surprised at this day and age they're doing humor like that, whereas there are so many wonderful Native humorous comedians, writers out there that were all like Tom King adapted his Green Grass Running Water into a screenplay that he's been unable to get the interest of anybody with. And it's like, I'm salivating at the thought of that being made. I've got a whole bunch of comedies and of plays and novels that are just waiting to be adapted for the screen or for a television show or for something like that, but probably would rather go with a non-Native perspective.
Now, 2 decades ago, when you started writing these essays, they seem to be more representation of Indigenous people in pop culture. You had shows like The Res, North of 60,
Yep.
and Northern Exposure, just to name a handful of them. How represented are Indigenous people now?
I'm seeing very little of it on the main networks. I mean, now that we have APTN, a lot of them think that let's pass it on to them. They've got their own network, their own budget. They can do it. Things still pop up here and there, but mostly it's almost always on APTN. They're the one who have Blackstone. I worked on helped develop a Native sitcom there called Mixed Blessings. So I'm finding it less and less obvious in terms of the representation of the Native perspective and the Native face on mainstream Canadian television. A lot of it is now going to films. There's an Aboriginal Film Festival here in Toronto and in Edmonton. I think there's one in Vancouver. I'm not sure. So that voice is getting out through that way. But it'd be so cool to have something on one of the major networks happening these days.
Because APTN and even the festivals, they all seem to be very niche. Do you think mainstream is the goal, the ultimate goal, to be accepted in the mainstream?
That would be good. I mean, they had Little Mosque on the Prairie, which was, you would think niche, but it was very, very mainstream. Mm-hmm. I think, and it depends on what you mean by mainstream. Something that can be appreciated by like the dominant culture.
Like
yeah, I think so. I think we've got a wonderfully developed sense of humor. If you've ever sat down with Tom or with Graham Greene, they're hilariously funny. And one of the things I talk about when I talk about humor is that Native humor, first of all, there really is no such thing as native humor because at time of contact, there were over 50 separate languages and dialects spoken in Canada. And that is like discovering Europe. There's no particularly European sense of humor. There's British humor, there's German humor, if you want to call it that, all these different things. So with native people, there's no one particular native humor. We all have our own perspectives on how the world is funny. But that being said, there are certain characteristics in our joint experiences as Aboriginal people in Canada that give us a very specific and unique outlook on life, you know? So with that being said, what makes Native people laugh will make non-Native people laugh, and what makes non-Native people laugh makes us laugh. When I go home at night, I watch Simpsons, I watch Big Bang Theory, all these things, and I laugh. 90% of the people who go and see my plays or buy my novels are non-Native, right? Somebody once said to me, there's no particularly Native way to boil an egg.
A good story is a good story.
A good story is a good story. A good joke is a good joke. So in terms of Hollywood, in terms of all that, yes, we are waiting for our chance to break free and share our wonderfully preserved Aboriginal sense of humor. Everybody seems to think of Native people as, you know, the tragic Native people, the stoic Native people, the poor Native people, all these different things. And one of the things I've tried to do with my career is sort of expand that boundary of the perception of Native people and our literature as being, you know, the funny Aboriginal person. Because I've been to over 140 Native communities across Canada and the United States. And everywhere I've been greeted with a laugh, a smile, and a joke. But a lot of people don't realize that. They think of the protesters, they think of Oka, they think of the murdered and missing Native women, and it's like, it's our sense of humor that's allowed us to survive those darker aspects of our immediate history.
I want to shift gears from humor to erotica. I don't know why I want to laugh when I say erotica. I feel like I'm like a 7-year-old kid.
It's better than neurotica.
When did you become interested in exploring Indigenous erotica?
Puberty.
Or sexual?
Why do you ask?
I just want to know. But when did you become interested in exploring sexuality in the Indigenous community?
Well, I have a series of 3 books that explore and deconstruct various aspects of the Native culture. The first one, you've heard me mention many times, Me Funny, which is a series of essays that take a look at Native humor from so many different perspectives, from a stand-up comedian, from the linguistic aspect, from a storyteller aspect, from pop culture, from visual arts, etc. And because, again, I wanted to show both the Native community and our own community how wonderfully robust and powerful our sense of humor was. And when that came out, I remember that it was incredibly successful. I was so proud of it and so proud of the people that helped me put it together. A few years went by and I began thinking, okay, what else needs to be explored, needs to be deconstructed, needs to be revisited and reevaluated that perhaps both the dominant culture and our own culture has a problem imagining. And then it occurred to me, Native sexuality. Because if you look at the media of the dominant culture, the only time anything to do with Native erotica pops up is either dead prostitutes, high rates of STDs in a Native community, or sexual abuse from residential schools. Yet, we have the highest birth rate of any culture in Canada, so there had to be something fun about it. So I decided I want to do a book about Native sexuality, but I wasn't sure if it would be welcomed. And I started talking with a bunch of people about this. And there was an art exhibit that went across Canada back in, I think it was the late 90s, a collection of erotic Native art and art installation called Exposed. And the woman who had put it together, again, was worried about, was she being disrespectful? And she went to visit an elder and asked about this, and the elder said, it's about time you young people reclaimed our sexuality. And that stayed with me. So I decided, okay, I want to do a book that deals with Aboriginal sexuality from a number of different viewpoints. So I contacted a dream team of people who I thought might have something interesting to say about Native sexuality and a comfortability in exploring the topic. So I Thompson Highway has a great essay in it on why the Cree language is the sexiest language ever created, right? And I've got essays there on erotic.
Why? Sorry.
I'll tell you another later,
Okay.
afterwards. On why Inuit, on an exploration of erotic Inuit sculptures. Another one on the erotic art of Norval Morso. A whole bunch, you know, and I wrote about the portrayal of sexuality in Indigenous, in mainstream literature. So it basically was like a topic that was just begging to be explored and shed the light on it. Looked under the loincloth.
So it's not a taboo within the community.
I was worried about that. I really was, but it wasn't. It became very, very popular, and it was like I consider it more of a necessary book than Me Funny was.
And then there also seems to be a link between humor and erotica in the sense that both are subjects that we really don't associate with Indigenous people.
Exactly, and also what was funny is of the 13 or 14 essays in Me Funny, I think 8 or 9 of them were funny. Which was like, you know, I didn't tell them to be funny, but sex, humor, Native people all go together. So they were actually, it was quite a delightful surprise to take a look at what people had to say and sort of the positive and the critical elements of it.
Drew Hayden Taylor, it's been such a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you for being here.
Pleasure was mine.
And that's it for tonight's agenda in the summer. I'm Nam Kiwanuka. Thanks for watching TVO and for joining us online at tvo.org. And we'll see you again next time.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit tvo.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.